Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, the Pentagon announces a new strategy to defend U.S. interests in the Arctic. Learn about how the military plans to operate in the far north. And could MDMA, often known as Ecstasy, be an effective treatment for PTSD? We share one veteran's story on the effort to allow the drug's use. Plus, should medals of honor awarded to troops who took part in a massacre of Native Americans be rescinded? The Pentagon weighs in on the question. Finally, we talk to a Medal of Honor recipient about the nature of courage and how it can be developed in everyday life. It's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Pat Hansen. As global temperatures warm and new areas of navigation open up in the far north, the Arctic has become an area of increased military competition in recent years. Russia, China, and a slew of internationally allied countries, including the US, Canada, and partner nations like Norway and Finland, are all jockeying for strategic supremacy as the Arctic opens up. But what's the US strategy? The Pentagon recently released an updated plan for its Arctic strategy, and Military Times ground warfare editor Todd South came by to explain how it will work.
The Pentagon recently announced an update to its Arctic strategy, the first major revision since the last strategy published in 2019. Since then, each of the military services have taken an Arctic-focused effort, including establishing new units, revamping training, updating gear, and bulking up existing installations and bases with new technology. Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks told reporters at a Pentagon briefing that the strategy update focuses on improving sensors for domain awareness, supporting military readiness exercises in the region, and upgrading and adding cold weather gear for a variety of military units and missions.
The Arctic region of the United States is critical to the defense of our homeland, the protection of U.S. national sovereignty, and the preservation of our defense treaty commitments. It's home to significant defense infrastructure important for homeland defense and projecting global power. Radars and sensors in Alaska detect threats to the homeland, and Alaska's strategic location places it at the crossroads between the Indo-Pacific and Europe.
Driving much of the strategy focus for the Defense Department has been the increase in activity by both China and Russia in the Arctic. While Russia has long held the most territory in the Arctic, China has increasingly partnered with Russia for military operations in the region and is investing in new technology to operate in the Arctic. For example, China possesses 3 icebreaker research ships, which it has used to test underwater drones and polar-capable aircraft in the Arctic. In 2020, U.S. Alaska Command reported they had intercepted more Russian military aircraft than at any other time since the Cold War ended in 1989. Going back to 2021, the Russian military showcased its ability to maneuver in the area, sending 3 submarines to the North Pole with the capacity to carry 48 ballistic missiles. Russian ground troops and fighter jets met the subs at the pole. In just the past year, 2 nations in the high north, Finland and Norway, have sought to join NATO in the shadow of the ongoing Russian war in Ukraine. The U.S. has also been bulking up some of its Arctic presence in the last few years. For example, in 2019, the Army stood up the 11th Airborne Division in Alaska, dubbed the Arctic Angels. That division has been widening its exercises across Alaska for maneuverability across the region and various geographic locations. The 25th Infantry Division out of Hawaii began rotations to train in Alaska in recent years.
Rest assured that the department is investing in the Arctic across all domains. We've invested in ground and air capabilities and infrastructure, including in the development of a system of sensors that will provide enhanced air and maritime domain awareness, and in extreme cold weather equipment and gear. We've invested in space capabilities that further improve domain awareness and provide a clear picture of the Arctic operating environment. And we've invested in the maritime domain. In fact, the Navy has launched several research and development efforts to enhance capabilities that enable more accurate modeling and predictions of the Arctic domain.
Other efforts have taken place throughout the North. In April 2023, the Pentagon renamed Thule Air Base, a ballistic missile warning site in Greenland, Pitfuk Space Base, under the control of U.S. Space Force, which was established in 2019. The base includes crews that operate early warning radar weapon systems. Those systems track sea-launched and intercontinental ballistic missile threats, which helps with strategic missile warning and missile defense. Secretary Hicks said that the department has spent $43 million over the past 3 years to upgrade the Arctic ground-based sensors, as well as tens of millions on improvements to the NORAD long-range radar sites. So what's in the new plan? Well, the strategy introduced by Hicks was short on specifics, but broadly it pushes for greater spending on high-tech sensors and radar systems, Arctic equipment, and more investment in the Pitufik Space Base in Greenland. Also underlined in the strategy is the growing need for more partnerships with Arctic nations, including Canada and northern NATO nations. In the meantime, the Pentagon is trying to make good on warnings from the officials that the military needs to be more active in higher latitudes. In February, more than 8,000 U.S. Army soldiers conducted a 2-week large-scale exercise, which included helicopter deep strikes, flying rocket launchers to more than 500 miles above the Arctic Circle, and snowmobile hunter-killer teams using shoulder-fired rockets to thwart a simulated invasion force. Canada, Sweden, Finland, and South Korea all participated in that February exercise, and 18 other nations sent observers. In 2022, the Army awarded a $278 million contract to replace its 1960s-era tracked snow vehicle. The new cold-weather all-terrain vehicle was tested during subsequent exercises in negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. As the Army stood up the new airborne division in Alaska, it also began building a specialized, Stryker-based Arctic Brigade combat team for the region. The Navy is working with the Coast Guard as Congress has supported building 3 icebreaker ships to better access the Arctic. Not to be left out in the cold, the Marine Corps began upgrading its Korean War-era cold weather gear back in 2018, as well as increasing its presence in annual rotations for its partner training in Norway, which has been a decades-long endeavor. In early 2023, the Corps' training and education plans called for analyzing Alaska-based training for Marine units, giving them more space than is currently available at their Bridgeport, California-based Mountain Warfare Training Center. Hicks' introduction of the updated Arctic strategy shined a light on the Pentagon's awareness of the need to increase operations in the North, a fact she underlined in her recent press conference. Reporting for Military Times, I'm Todd South.
When we return, a veteran's experience with the potential healing benefits of ecstasy in an effort to get the FDA to approve it. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. Veterans around the country know about the pernicious nature of PTSD and how hard it can be to treat. Among the many options veterans have tried have been various psychedelic drugs, including mushrooms and others. One option that has for years been debated for its effectiveness is MDMA, or ecstasy as it's commonly known. Recently, MDMA underwent a trial by a panel of experts at the Food and Drug Administration to see whether it could be endorsed as an effective treatment. Around the time of the panel, the Associated Press caught up with one veteran who has spent years looking for a solution to his post-traumatic stress.
We're gonna go skydiving. It's a sport I got into in 2013, I think. High adrenaline, high-risk sport, which I was told, and all the literature suggests that people who have PTSD or have been through traumatic events tend to engage in risky behavior.
Casey Tylek is a veteran and a participant in the recent MDMA study who said that PTSD was ravaging his life following his service.
I know I was on a downward spiral. I know I was on a self-destruction path. Whether it was intentional or just engaging in riskier and riskier sports until one of them finally killed me because I just didn't care anymore, because I had nothing to live for, because I couldn't keep a stable life because of PTSD. And how lucky am I to have gone through all that? And I have a career, I have a fiance, I have my baby dog Cider, I have a house. My best friend calls me, he's like, hey, I broke both my ankles skiing in Switzerland. I'm like, yeah, I'll come pick you up at the airport, man. And I go and I pick him up, and driving him home, and we're sitting outside his mom's house, and he's sitting in the back of my car. I think he'd asked me something like, "You seem off tonight, like you seem quiet," and I just told him, like, I can't take it anymore. Like, I don't have it in me. I think I'm just gonna kill myself. Like, I can't make relationships work, I can't make work work, I can't, you know, I had a goal of trying to become a doctor. It's just, I'm broken. Like, I'm unlovable, I'm miserable to be around, I can't keep a job, like. And he sat there and argued with me.
Tylik said all the normal modes of therapy weren't working for him, so he wanted to try something new.
And you try talk therapy, and that doesn't work. You try cognitive behavioral therapy, you know, saying what you feel immediately when you feel it, and, you know, realizing where you are and centering you. I'm like, dude, like, this is like 2019. I believe this is 2019 at the time, and like, I've been through it all. I'm like, no, dude, I've been trying for 9 years. Like, this isn't gonna work. There's no fix. There's no cure. There's no way out, dude. Like, and he's like, what about ecstasy? I'm like, I don't do drugs. He's like, no, but like, didn't they do a thing with that? And I was like, I'd read like a headline somewhere.
He said MDMA worked well for him, acting as a sort of emotional support.
The other thing about the MDMA is you have all this empathy. And you're able to just feel for yourself and realize how awful these things were. This therapy works. I know it works. I know it's effective.
But the special panel investigating the drug's use was not as sure, and in a hearing this June, decided against recommending to the FDA that MDMA be used as a PTSD treatment.
I will now call the June 4, 2024 Psychopharmacologic Drug Advisory Committee meeting to order.
Although metamethamphetamine does not typically produce the types of perceptual disturbances characteristic of classic psychedelics, it does produce prolonged alterations in mood, empathy, and judgment. The nature of the experience may differ, but the impact on trial design and interpretability is very similar.
For our question, there is 1 vote for yes and 10 votes for no, and no abstentions.
In headlines from around the military, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin directed the Pentagon to review the 20 Medals of Honor awarded to U.S. troops for actions at Wounded Knee in 1890, when soldiers killed and injured between 350 and 375 Lakota men, women, and children. Austin ordered the creation of a special panel to determine whether to retain or rescind the medals, according to the Department of Defense. In a July 19th memorandum ordering the review, Austin said the panel would investigate each awardee's individual actions and also consider the context of the overall engagement. It's never too late to do what's right, an unnamed senior defense official said in a statement about the panel. And that's what's intended by the review that the Secretary directed, which is to ensure that we go back and review each of these medals in a rigorous and individualized manner. In more news from around the military, a bipartisan congressional panel says the U.S. is not prepared for a major war, saying its global military competitors are advancing rapidly while America develops capability at a flat pace. The evaluation of the state of national security is a regular report authored by a group of experts summoned by Congress every 4 years to get an outside assessment of the U.S.'s defense capability. The panel this year said that, in its eyes, the Pentagon moves too slow, Congress is too dysfunctional to advance security issues, and the public is woefully unaware of the potential shortfalls. The context for much of the report was the rapid advance and partnership of Russia and China. Recommendations for solutions were broad and included an overhaul of how weapon systems are sourced and purchased, higher defense spending, and long-term integrated deterrence that mixes military and political efforts. For a full story on the report, head to defensenews.com. In a related item, Washington's top diplomat and defense chief announced $500 million in military funding Tuesday to boost Philippine defenses and advance a proposed military intelligence sharing pact as the two nations renewed their concerns over China's actions in the region. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin met with President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., who has sought to fortify his country's alliance with Washington as hostilities between Philippine and Chinese forces flare in the disputed South China Sea.
Both of us share concerns, and many other countries in the region share concerns as well, about some of the actions that People's Republic of China has taken, escalatory actions in the South China Sea, the East China Sea, and elsewhere. And this is something that we heard much about from our colleagues at the recent ASEAN meetings.
Today, as you heard, Secretary Blinken and I announced that we are poised to deliver a once-in-a-generation investment to help modernize the armed forces of the Philippines and the Philippine Coast Guard. We're working with the U.S. Congress to allocate $500 million in foreign military financing to the Philippines. And this level of funding is unprecedented, and it sends a clear message of support for the Philippines from the Biden-Harris administration, the U.S. Congress, and the American people.
From the Army, William Calley Jr., the only U.S. soldier convicted of crimes in the My Lai massacre in Vietnam, has died. Calley was in charge of a platoon that killed more than 500 civilians in March of 1968, one of the most notorious massacres in U.S. military history. Calley was sentenced to life in prison for his actions, but had his sentence reversed by President Richard Nixon. He died in a hospice center in Florida at the age of 80. And finally, Marines at Camp Lejeune recently got a chance to test their mettle against a pair of unexpected combatants, professional arm wrestlers. A pair of the brawny athletes stopped by the base recently just before a nearby event called the World Series of Arm Wrestling. The arm wrestlers gave the Marines tips on the sport and let them try their luck against the pros. World Series of Arm Wrestling founder Greg Sharp said he enjoyed the opportunity to introduce the sport to service members.
Well, we had a couple of pretty well-known arm wrestlers, Don Underwood and Jamie Sheldon. They are part of the team here at World Series of Arm Wrestling, and I called them up and said, guys, we have an opportunity to come on base the day before we actually get started with the event, and would you guys come in a day early and pull with a bunch of troops and introduce arm wrestling to them? And lots of smiles. A lot of guys that just were happy to have something different there. Competing, we put a bunch of them against each other, have a little camaraderie. These young men and women are heading over to Japan here in the next couple of weeks, and they'll be gone for 6 to 8 months. So if we left them with anything, I hope we left them with a great feel of a new experience and just some excitement and some anxious energy to come back and maybe start arm wrestling when they get back to the States.
When we come back, our personal finance expert returns with some advice on what to prioritize first, paying down debt or saving up cash. Stay tuned. Welcome back. When you start to generate some extra income, you might have a choice. Should you pay off debt or build up savings? On this edition of Money Minute, Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union brings you tips on how to prioritize.
Got extra cash coming in? That's awesome. Establishing a good balance between saving and paying off debt is a smart way to reach excellent financial health. You can and should both save money and pay down debt at the same time, but where to start? Start by investing in your future self. Shore up your emergency fund, making sure you're prepared for the unexpected. You should save enough to cover 3 to 6 months of living expenses. Your next savings goal should focus on financial goals like buying a house or retirement. Once you've opened your account, start to create the balance between saving and paying debt by using a ratio method like the 50-30-20 rule to help you divide your cash flow and conquer debt. 50% should go towards bills. And make saving a bill too. 30% can go toward wants and needs, and the remaining 20% goes toward debt. Continue to make all your minimum payments, but add extra to your higher rate or higher balance loans and credit cards. When you pay off all your debt, you can adjust your ratios to increase your savings until retirement. Whatever method you choose, use it to help you achieve freedom from debt and overall financial well-being.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more coverage of military and defense topics, pilot your personal surveillance craft to show you militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more headlines. And to be the most knowledgeable pilot in the ready room, sign up for our early bird brief, compiled each morning to bring you the most recent headlines. Lastly, if social media is where you find open source intelligence, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. And until the government hits it with a tactical nuke, we're on TikTok, so go find us there as well. When we come back, a Medal of Honor recipient talks about the nature of courage and how you can develop it in everyday life. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Pat Hansen. To Medal of Honor recipient Melvin Morris, courage has a simple foundation: doing the right thing. The Vietnam vet fought his way out of the jungles in 1969 after being gravely wounded, and survived with a new perspective on the nature of bravery. In part of our new series, The Honor Project, Morris talks about what it means to have courage and where he found inspiration.
Part of actually receiving a Medal of Honor, what sticks out in my mind, but you can't forget it, is the life and death that day. I respected and admired and regarded my fellow soldiers and risked my life to help them save theirs, because my life didn't mean nothing because I valued theirs as well as I valued mine. What stands into my mind is that my father, he rushed to a young teenager's aid because he had got in a confrontation with others and was seriously wounded. And he ran to his aid, and on top of going to his aid, he also donated blood to help save their kid's life, and I'll never forget that. My definition of courage is one who's willing to put his life or himself in harm's way to help another in a perilous situation, not regarding and thinking about what could happen to him or her, is just willing to sacrifice that just to help another person. You know, if you are a person that's of higher integrity and moral values, you got courage, because you have to care for your fellow man, to love one another and to care for one another and to be willing to protect one another. And everyone has this built in them. It's just are they willing to step forward and set an example of courage to help somebody, because you can't practice on having courage. Courage is within you, and how you develop courage is being a good moral person of good character, integrity, and understanding, and loving of people. Doing what's right, doing the right thing is courage. Courage can come an example as someone having the courage to help someone in a bad situation, not stand by and just observe and see someone needing help but not helping. It's a human thing. That's how I can define courage. You got to be a caring, loving human being, step in and quit worrying about yourself. Help others.
Well, that's all we have time for in this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.